The Journal of Jesse Smoke, Part 13, page 134, November 5th, 1838. Perhaps it is hard for you to imagine what it is like on our villages upon wheels. Here is a description of how each of our camps are set up each day. In the morning, the first to leave are the hunters, with bows and arrows and their long blowguns, which are excellent for small game such as birds and squirrels. They fan out to each side of our route that we march. The conductor has told them where our camping place will be that night, and they meet us there. All through the day they hunt, and when we see them again, each shall have whatever game they catch. One may bring in a brace of turkeys, another may be waiting with a fat deer, yet another carries 3 squirrels, each pierced in the neck with a blowgun dart. After the hunters, the wagons set out. The first to go is the wagon furthest along the trail, for our camps are made in long lines of lodges, each family or wagon setting up their own lodge circle. When the wagon reaches our next appointed camp, it will be the first to stop. The second wagon will go beyond it and make their halt, and so on. Thus, the next morning, the first to set out shall be the one that was the last of the day before. At our next camp, 10 miles further down the road, the commissary and assistant commissary will be waiting, with the wagons driven by the local farmers, filled with the corn and fodder we have purchased. If we are fortunate, we shall be near a mill, and the corn will be ground. If not, then the women of the lodge will bring out their mortars and hollow a base of a tree. Then, with wooden pestles, they will pound the corn, sieve it out, pound again, and so on until there is enough flour for cooking. Some will prepare the corn, filling the camp with such a thumping that it is as if hundreds of drums were being beaten all at once. Others gather wood for fires. Men on horses, our police among them, drag in the dry wood behind them, with ropes fastened to their saddles, as children pick up twigs and small sticks. If we are lucky, there is enough dry wood. If we are lucky, it is not a day when it is cold or raining or snowing, though such days are precious and few. Then, when the fires are made and our lodges are all set up, some with blankets or canvas tied up as lean-tos next to the wagons, there is some time for relaxation. Then, at times, the children begin to play. They play our old game of chunky, in which spears are thrown towards a rolling target. They play stickball or shoot arrows at marks set up on the trees. They pass the intricately woven strings of cat's cradle back and forth between their hands. There is a little laughter as they play, but only a little, and their play is brief, for all are exhausted after another day on the trail. Visitors wander through the camp, stopping now and then by our fires to speak with us. Some are the tradesmen who have brought supplies. They are often courteous to us. Some are ministers or kindly intentioned people who have donated food or clothing. Others are merely curious white people who wander through looking at us as if we are forest animals dressed in clothing. Our light horse keep a close watch to make sure that none are selling whiskey. Sadly, at each place we stop, those have given themselves to drink usually find some way of purchasing some. Night falls, early and dark. Those who have come to our camp to visit must leave. We allow none but to our own people to remain with us after 9:00 p.m. The people fall into an exhausted slumber. Yet their rest is no rest from the pain they must always bear to them. To them, in their sleep, come the dear faces of those who have died, those whose touch they will never know again, and on the side of the grave, many cry out in the night as dreams and memories come to remind them of the pain they have endured and the trails that still lie ahead. November 6, 1838. Crossed the Cumberland River at Nashville Toll Bridge, 2 days behind Situaki and Jones, as always, overcharged with not a thank you for the toll collectors. Rations and supplies waiting for us in Nashville, procured by Lewis Ross, corn fodder and oats. Also, warm clothes, which will be greatly needed as the weather has quickly grown colder. Blankets, cloaks, bearskins, overcoats, thick boots, heavy socks. Camped near Putman's, we are not far from the Hermitage. Several men in our party also fought at Horseshoe Bend, but none rode out to make a courtesy call on Old Hickory, as did a number of our people led through here by by the Army a year ago in October of 1837. Among them were James Starr and Charles Reese, two Cherokee men who served under General Jackson in several battles during the Red Stick Rebellion. Both of them, Starr and Reese, rode out to the Hermitage to visit their old commander and were received graciously by himself and joined Old Hickory for tea. It is said that Old Hickory is not well. When he learned that John Ross had been given the contract that we should conduct our own removal, the ex-president wrote an angry letter of protest to U.S. Attorney General Felix Grundy. Why is it that Scamp Ross is not banished from the notice of administration? He wrote. He urged to no avail that the contract be arrested. His words were totally ignored. That is one of the few things in the story of our removal that brings a smile to the face of the Cherokee. November 9th, 1838. Camped near Long Creek. These are the chores that our policemen must intake in a typical day. Confiscate whiskey, of which sadly there is always new store to be found, sometimes hidden in such clever places as a false bottom of a trunk or tied into a sack beneath a wagon, and receive the food and fodder waiting at various stops and junctions, and find drinkable water and see to the orderly water of teams as well as filling the water casks, and order the silt trenches dug and see that the task is adequately done, and see to gathering of firewood that is increasingly scarce, and get a few fires built and ensure that cooking is taken care of, and assist our doctor in identifying those who are sick and seeing that they are cared for, and burn the blankets of those who have and who have died, and when the clothing or footwear is available, and distribute it to those who are shoeless or whose clothing has worn to rags and tatters, and patrol the camp at night to ask those who cry out to be quiet so that others might sleep, and see that no ill is done, and that no thieves have crept in to steal from our people, and wake the camp the next morning, though many have no wish to waken, and sometimes there are those who will never wake again, and dig graves to bury the dead, and mound over the silt trenches with earth and bury the garbage to keep the rats and the wild dogs from invading our camp, and confiscate whiskey yet again. And before we move on, take roll to see that none are forgotten, to note that those that have deserted, and of which there are at least one or two each week, although there are also those who have grown confused and wandered off and become lost, and so we must search for them and try to save them from harm. I have not yet found time to speak to Reverend Foreman, and I asked that I might borrow a book from him. There has been, as you imagine, little time for reading. November 10th, 1838. Passed through Port Royal, Kentucky. Excessive rain today made the travel miserable. Our fires sputter from the rain. The wind blows freezing rain through our tents. I will cease writing now and put my journal back into my pack and protect it from this rain. November 11th, 1838. Among our party are two families of Creek Indians. The removal of 20,000 of their nation to the western lands took place in 1836. Like others of their people, they sought refuge among the Cherokee and are counted now as Cherokee. This evening, around the fire, I sat with one of those Creek Indians, a man of 37 named Jim Tiger. He was one of the regiment of Creek warriors who fought under American officers in Florida against the Seminole, while their families remained in the Creek concentration camps in Alabama. Jim Tiger's story. When removal came, the Creek soldiers who helped the Americans were packed into steamboats at New Orleans, along with their families and all of the others, and shipped out west. The river travel frightened them greatly. Their fears were well-founded. The boat on which Jim Tiger and 600 others had been placed, a steamer called the Monmouth, was poorly captained. Late at night, On the wide Mississippi, it collided with another boat and was cut into two. More than 300 Creeks drowned. Jim Tiger's aunt was among them. He and his remaining family fled back to our Cherokee Nation rather than continue their dreaded journey. Now he found himself forced west once again. But at least, he said, there is earth beneath our feet, and this trail is not water. November 12th, 1838. On the move again and pausing yesterday for Sunday devotions, I wonder if we should also be traveling on Sundays. Our progress has been too slow, and the weather is worsening. Snow has fallen all day, wet, driving snow pushed into our faces by a cold northern wind, and we are grateful for the warmer clothing provided in Nashville, but wish there had been more. Many of us are still thinly clothed. Reverend Foreman has a rather lengthy conversation with me yesterday after religious services. He knew some of my teachers at the mission school and said he heard I was a promising scholar. I replied that my Latin was good, but that I only have a small knowledge of Greek and almost none at all of Hebrew. I confessed that though I had owned a small library, now sadly lost to me, it had little knowledge of the classics, and I have read through the Bible from cover to cover more than 6 times at most. For some reason, he smiled at that. He urged that I should continue my studies in the West. There, he promised, we will soon have schools set up, including seminaries for both boys and girls. Though we have lost our homeland, we have not lost our spirit. We shall remain Cherokee and rise again. Nova ex veteris, he concluded. I nodded my head. The new must come out of the old. Reverend Foreman appeared to approve my weak translation from his Latin. Not only students will be needed, but there will also be those of our people educated enough to become teachers, he said, and put a hand upon my shoulder. Then, even before I asked, he offered to lend me some of his books. Imagine my surprise when the volume he chose to hand me was the very one I had begun to read but never finished. It was my old friend, my fellow castaway, Robinson Crusoe. I have read 20 more pages of it this evening. My sad surroundings quite faded away as I become lost in the story. I must confess, however, it seems to me that the good man Friday might be a Cherokee, a younger version of Feeler. I also find myself picturing the cannibals in the story as members of the Georgia Guard. November 13, 1838. This morning, as I went to the water, I felt I was not alone. I looked up from the flowing stream after having washed my forehead. To my surprise, I saw the Feeler standing on the other side, downstream from me. He stared at me so intently that it seemed as if he were looking right through me. I made as if to cross over him. He held up his right hand, motioning me to stay where I was. Grandfather, I said to him, are you coming with us to the West? He smiled. I went down on one knee and put his hands upon the soil. I understood. He was staying in our old land. I stood up again. I saw he was no longer carrying his book in the pack that he had always slung over his shoulder. Was it his book, or was his book what he had placed in the hollow of the tree in my dream? I suddenly realized that the Feeler's motions were less stiff than at the time I last saw him. He no longer used a staff. My great-great-grandfather placed his hand on his heart and then swung it around, palm open, towards me. I did the same. My eyes filled with tears as I did so. His image blurred in my sight, and then, like the mist blown away in the wind, he was gone. I know I shall never see him again in this lifetime.